pleasure to be able to be in the company of such a wonderful audience and to be able to bring up this wonderful panel that we have for you this evening. As I introduce each of them and they come up here, I want to say, please help me celebrate each and every one of them as the wonderful women in tech that they are. In alphabetical order, please join me in welcoming Jen Ware, Senior Director of Engineering and Economics. Liz Healy, Software Developer at Meetup. Margaret Godowns, from right here at Boomtown. The wonderful Amy Piazza, the CTO for Next up I have the Professor and Chair of the Department of Computer Science at Charleston Southern University, Valerie Spencer. And last, but by no absolute means least, none other than the VP of Sales and Marketing right here at Boomtown, Shannon Williams. Ladies, once again, thank you so much for taking part in this panel this evening. I'm going to ask you all to respond to the first question, because I know we all want to hear what you have to say because you each bring a unique perspective. So please tell us what it's like to be the only woman on the team, whether it's now or whether that was a role that you had in the past. What was that experience like for you? What did you learn from it? What did it bring to you? What did it do for you as far as your career, or what do you want to share with us about that? Jen, if you'd like to go first. You were holding the microphone.
I have been the only woman on a team multiple times. For those of you who are in the sciences, I mean, starting from college, and even before that, I had 3 older brothers, so I have always been the only girl on the team. And then I went to the sciences, and there was very few women in the sciences, and then that propelled me into my career. So currently, I am the only woman on the leadership team, which is interesting. And I think I've just learned to deal with it a little bit better. I don't really think about it too much. I do find myself typically the person who's pushing for diversity and inclusion. And a simple example would be we were going to do a recruiting night at our other office in Richmond, and the guys were talking about, yeah, we really want to encourage and bring more women, right? It's about getting more women to apply. And I said, so what are you doing about it? I said, have you reached out to the women tech locally? And then have you reached out to the women within your own organization? And then people that are the diversity we have here, so that when people come in the door, they see diversity, right? They see people like themselves and immediately feel a little bit more comfortable, and they can see themselves on that team. And I think it just gives that perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Liz, what do you have to say about your experience?
So I have really been on both sides of the spectrum. I think sometimes I've felt like lonely and that I need to walk to another office full of women to actually talk and have like some fun conversations. But then there are times where I've almost felt powerful and intimidating, to be honest. Like when we're in an office setting where it's business formal attire and I'm clumping around in my heels and people are like, oh, she's coming down the hallway. And so I think that's almost a good feeling, but besides that, it's really, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, there are times where I'm in a room full of men making decisions and I bring that extra to the table because we do think differently, and I think it's really important that everyone's thoughts are heard, whether it's male or female. And yeah.
So I like that. So what I heard, if you all heard the same thing, was she was talking about empowerment through feeling and being confident. That's what I heard that you learned from that. So I think that's pretty awesome. Margaret, what about you?
Hi everyone. So I started at Boomtown. I'm a project manager now, but I started at Boomtown as an engineer. And I walked in on my first day and looked around. We were in a different office. We were all kind of crammed into a smaller office on Rutledge, and I looked around, and there wasn't a girl in sight. And imposter syndrome is real, and I felt it so heavily then. But it turned out that I had one of the most supportive group of men around me. I seriously lucked out. A few of them, one is right here, Kurt. We shared a space heater. But a few of them marched in the Women's March the following February, and they are just, I had a really, like I said, a really good experience. I'm now a project manager, and I've managed a team of all men, and that was also an imposter syndrome situation, because you're all of a sudden telling senior engineers what to do and suggesting that they do things differently. But what I've learned from it is that you're there for a reason. You've got to believe in yourself, and as long as you believe in yourself and you believe that you should be there, then it all works out.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I've been in a variety of situations. Not all of them have been only men. I've had a variety of teams that I've worked on, but I've managed teams of only men. I've worked with teams where I have been the only woman. And I think some of the things that I've learned are leadership and independence. You learn to kind of operate on your own and to take your own actions. So when you want to get something done, you tend to do it yourself. And I think as women, we tend to do that anyway. But I think being in a situation where you're the only person and you're kind of lonely or isolated, you tend to take your own actions and do more by yourself. I also think you tend to, if you have the leadership personality, you tend to be more of a leader in that sort of scenario as well. And those are things that I've used in my career. And it is an interesting dynamic. I think you do tend to want to be one of the guys at some point. I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing or a negative thing. It depends on how it plays out. But it's always an interesting way to get started. And it's always a learning process.
I think like the other women on the panel, I've had a variety of experiences of being the only woman in the team. Starting grad school almost 20 years ago until now, thankfully they've been different experiences. But the early years of being the only woman in grad school and all these guys with me, I think I had a lot of anxiety about being the only one and feeling a lack of confidence in my own abilities. It may have been because I was the only woman, it may have been because I was so young. Compared to now. I feel like that was a young time. And so I think there was really I had to do a lot of work to build myself up to where I felt confident on there. And I would say, just as you all are doing right now, having a posse is what I call it, having a posse behind you that believes in you, even if they're not in your field. Because obviously they're not going to be at the table with you, but if they're someone you can bounce those ideas off of, that helped me a great deal. Just to have other people I could talk to. They didn't fix my problems, but I could at least talk about it. And I've had a variety of really good experiences being the only woman on the team. Like Liz was saying, I think sometimes that sets you apart, that makes you unique. If you're going to be the only woman anyway, you might as well use that to your advantage, not in a bad way, but just to kind of stand out and to shine and to just do your best job.
I also have been in a variety of situations, the only female on the team, from growing up young, being the only female on an all-boys soccer team, to engineering classes at Clemson, through executive teams in multiple situations. But I think what I've learned most is that, as Amy said, like one of the guys, I fought hard to be one of the guys and fit in. And then I realized over time that it's actually better to play your strengths as the female and be that female voice and use that voice. There are traits that we have as females that actually are unique, and we shouldn't emulate masculinity just for the sake of doing it. So I think, empathy, and we're typically better communicators. So use those to your strength, and it's okay. Show up prepared, bring the ideas that are unique that the gentlemen sitting around the table may not offer. So those are my experiences.
So our next question is actually going to be for Valerie. Because you work in the tech industry and you teach. So that's why I'm posing this question to you, because you see people at work, of course, all the time, and then you see a lot of up-and-coming students in the classroom that are taking various computer science classes. So what, in your opinion, has changed from the time you first got into the tech industry to now for women? How has that changed? What do you see that's been the catalyst to change tech for us as women?
Sure. So, unfortunately, if you look at just the straight numbers in undergraduates entering computer science, we haven't made a lot of strides, and that's unbelievably disappointing to me, especially after 10, 12 years in the workforce trying to get the young ladies to join the computer science field to get in there. We're still only about 20% of the undergraduate population for computer science. So while that's kind of concerning, the efforts now, though, are really pushing towards middle school, which is where we found that that's where a lot of people decide, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And if you think back to your career, maybe that's when someone came into the classroom, told you about engineering and said, this will be a good fit for you. So I do see that that shift is changing, and hopefully that will bring the numbers up. I do think now, because I entered the workforce, I guess, about 20 years ago to start now, I do think that there's an expectation that's different now that people will be more fair. I think that's a bit of a change, and maybe we have more, and it could be because of all of us being in the tech field and working on that, but I think the expectation is you are going to be fair, and that you are going to let women have a voice in the room. I've been on a great board where different men realizing that, maybe realizing that I was the only woman, or maybe realizing I'm a huge introvert. This is scary as all get out, and everyone's staring at me. They'll look at you and say, well, Valerie, what do you think? You've been kind of quiet, but that doesn't mean you don't have anything to say. And I've seen much more of that, where people are trying and making an effort to be inclusive. And if you're in that position and there's other females on your team, or maybe there's only one guy on the team, wouldn't that be great? Then you can ask them, hey, what do you think? And trying to be inclusive. So I have seen a shift in that.
Awesome. And I can tell you, just from my experience, the thing that I always try to keep in mind is we all have a voice. We all have something to say and something to contribute. And sometimes it just takes having that gumption to stand up and say what it is you need to say, whether you think anybody's listening or not. And that really, I think, can set the course for the positive things to come and those type of experiences. My next question is for Amy. So Amy, tell me about a time that you encountered a tough experience and what that was like for you, if you're open to sharing regarding your career, and what did you learn from that actually contributed to your personal growth? Because I believe that whether things happen to us by our own choosing that are good things or things that we've strived to achieve or things that are bad, they're all opportunities for us to grow as individuals in one way or another. So would you mind sharing an experience that everybody could benefit from?
You have the microphone.
I know. Which one? I think probably one of the toughest experiences that I actually learned from was the first time I got laid off. And that happens a lot in tech. And it's as someone like me who strives a lot for perfection, even though it's probably a bad trait, being laid off to me was a failure. And getting beyond that was something that I really had to work through. And so I learned a lot from being in that position. I learned a lot about myself, my talents, my skills, my abilities, my personality, what I needed to do to help myself get to the next step, what I needed to do to prove to myself that I was still capable and talented and able to get going again. It kind of knocks you off your feet at first, but you really do have to kind of survive it. And I think that was one of the toughest experiences. It was not the last time I was laid off, so that's happened a couple of times, and I survived the next time much better.
Let me ask you this, because I'm going to ask everybody this question too, though. regard to being laid off. How did you handle it? What kind of advice could you give us? Because I'm sure some of us, and myself included, at one time or another, hopefully not, but somebody in this room is going to face that situation. How did you handle it, and what's something you can share that could help us to get through a tough situation like that?
I think it's just don't stop. Just keep moving to the next place, right? Like get your resume out there, start networking right away, and keep moving. Because if you stop and you think, a lot of times you think too much. And so just keep moving to the next place that you want to be at, and understand that that's where you need to be, and that you're still valuable, and that's what you have to do to keep going. You just don't stagnate yourself.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep them on their toes. Watch this. So Jen?
I don't have a microphone.
I've got a microphone there. So tell me about a time. Oh, see, look, they were so kind to pass it down. I like playing hot potato. If anybody played that game when they were a kid. But tell us about a situation that you may have encountered, and what kind of advice do you have for folks that may be in that type of situation?
Can I piggyback off the layoff conversation?
Sure.
Because I think it's important in tech. And I've also been on sort of both sides of it as someone on a team who was coming, but then as a leader. And it will happen in tech. I mean, every year in the tech community in this town, there are layoffs. It is not about you. Okay? It is about the company and the business, and whether they're meeting their goals and what their business targets are and everything else. It is not about you and the value you bring to the table. So I want to make sure that I kind of highlight that point, that you have to get up and look at yourself and know that you have value and just move forward. Because I think once you let yourself move forward and you start to get other opportunities handed to you, or offered to you, I should say, you sort of get that back. It's a learning experience. It makes you look again at where you want to go, the next place. It makes you look at the next place a little bit differently. And those are really great life lessons. So, just to your point earlier too, the failures, those things that go wrong in life, look at them as how you can improve and how you can move moving forward.
Awesome. All right, thank you. So do you have any advice for us, the rest of us in the tech field, about overcoming hurdles and experiences and how we can boost ourselves up and get through tough situations?
Yeah, so I think the best advice I can give is speak up and ask questions. I've been in multiple situations at the beginning of my career where I was still not confident enough to really speak up. I can give you a fun example. So we were we were interviewing candidates for our CTO position. So we had people coming into the office and interviewing with us, coming to our development team, and it was just me and one other developer guy, and I believe the CTO said, like, so what do you guys do here? What's your specialty? And the guy on my team spoke up, well, I make things work, and she makes things look pretty. And I was just like, when you give that face, like. That was almost a turning point in my career, because I did not speak up at the time. I just kind of made that face and smiled and nodded. And I think if I were now in the position that I'm in, if I could go back and smack myself, I would tell myself to speak up. So I think it's always good to speak up. If you're uncomfortable and you are not enjoying what's going on around you, I think it's good to speak up. I think it's always good to also ask questions as well. I was fortunate enough to have a boss who could see it for me, which was great, but we don't always have bosses who can see what's going on the team. So any lady bosses in the room, authority figures, look after your team, because some people can't always speak up for themselves.
They do, and I think as women, it's our duty to help others on our team to be able to have that confidence, to be able to speak up. I can say from my own experience as a self-proclaimed person that would never get in the tech field, much less stand up here and speak in front of a bunch of people, because that was just not something I would ever do. It was through coaching and mentoring that helped me to see that I could actually do something like that. So, very important. Margaret, what can you tell us about a hurdle that you faced, or maybe just the fact that you're a woman in tech, and the overall hurdle, in your opinion, in getting through that and breaking out from what we'll call the stigma of being a stigma?
My hurdles are more kind of day-to-day little things you notice. And I noticed probably about a year ago, I was really fired up anytime I felt like I was being talked down to, or I felt like I was being overlooked. And I was really, really angry about it and would internalize it. And my mom actually suggested that I, instead of going home and saying, this, and this are a problem, and like it's unfair, and someone has to fix it, to instead say, this is a challenge, and I'm going to have to be the one to work through it. And even that slight mindset shift really opened a whole world for me. So now, instead of seeing something as this horrible mountain that I'm not going to climb, I just see it as a challenge that I'm going to get through. And a lot of times you might be the only girl on the team, but you're most likely not the only woman in the company. And you have to find your people. If you stay in your own little spot and think all day by yourself and don't bounce things off each other, you have a tendency to spiral downward, and I know I do. And sometimes I can be having the worst day and just walking over to one of my female coworkers and saying, do you want to go have some coffee, or do you want to go just take a lap and talk about this interaction I've just had with this person who I think is talking down to me, or I think is just being so sexist. It's usually not as bad as it seems, and just being able to share an experience with a female coworker just takes the weight off of you, and you realize that it might not be as horrible as you think, and you are not in this alone. Like, you have your people. And so if you haven't found your people, definitely find them, because they're there and they want to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you, Margaret. Oh, now we're going to skip Amy. You go to Valerie.
Sure.
So Valerie, tell us about how you jumped over that hurdle and what that was like, some words of wisdom for the rest of us.
So I think every day, right, we have some type of a challenge at work. It doesn't have to be a big challenge that comes up every now and then. Every little day there's something. I always call them the minnows, like they're like picking at you, and that little thing just bugs you at work. And I think that it's really important to have a good perspective about not only just like your life, but also that moment in time for you. Maybe you've faced some setback at work, something's happened, but to have the perspective that, this is one thing in a very long, career for me. And this is one setback, but I'm going to come back from that, and I'm going to make it this way. I'll give you a really, and I think it's important, like in our day-to-day business, because there's so much negativity, that you're going to face every day. Unless, if you're doing anything important, you're going to face negativity, I feel like, all around you. And I think that can just really weigh on you. I'll give you a funny example of this, but Wednesday, I always buy gas on Wednesday. I don't know why, it's just, I'm very engineer, like you buy gas on Wednesday. And I was at the gas station, and they didn't have, that the chocolate Easter Reese's eggs are the best combination of peanut butter and chocolate that they make in the world. And they were completely out of peanut butter chocolate things. And I was like, ugh, no more peanut butter chocolate things. And then I turned my car on, I rode out, no peanut butter chocolate. Should have gone to another gas station. I pull out, and this poor woman is trying to cross the street to go to the bus stop. And she has every last belonging in her trash bag, and it broke right there in front of me. And so I stopped my car, helped her get it out, get to the bus stop, did the 5 minutes worth of what I could do. But I think having something like that in your life, to where you're not just myopic and only seeing your problems, like your Easter egg, is not a big deal. It's really important. And so, like Nina was saying earlier, if you come out to some of these Code On meetings on Wednesday nights, and you see that, gosh, our problems are so small compared to what some people are dealing with, and I think that really
Awesome, thank you so much.
I'm gonna follow with the Easter egg.
And they are getting the white tops are even better.
David has me.
For me, I think it's really been just confronting. I've learned that some people don't have the perspective that they're doing things wrong. So working in a pretty large tech organization here locally on the leadership team, there was a sales leader and a very traditional sales leader, and he just didn't know. And so it was really a matter of having a very honest and candid conversation about what mansplaining meant. So really breaking out the definition, and it wasn't just me as a female that actually observed it. It was more prominent to females in the organization, but it happened across the board. So it was really just a problem he wasn't aware of, and if he was, he just denied it. But really felt good about confronting and having the conversation and just punching it in the face, addressing it head on. Because I think sometimes we let these things fester and fester, and they might be the minnows, but those ankle biters really add up to daily satisfaction. And for me, it was becoming a problem as a key partner from a marketing perspective. So it was just about being really honest about communicating and those feelings, and it wasn't just me, it was perspective from others on the team as well. So for me, that's what I've learned and take with me is just when you see these things, have a very open and honest conversation about them.
No, and that's awesome, because that kind of goes back to your point about it's not about you, it's about the company. But it's about what's good for the situation. And sometimes that means the uncomfortable conversations, but usually they turn out to be the better conversation that you could have, if you would have had it just a little sooner, because we maybe didn't have that insight, or sometimes that courage to do it, the situation might not have happened. So it's awesome that you're able to take care of that. Tell me about, and I'm going to ask all of you this because we're going to time travel for a second. So we've time traveled, and then we went back in time again. So you saw the future, and now you went way back into the past, and you saw your younger future self there, just emerging into the tech field. What would you say to that person when you talk to yourself to get them through knowing what you know now? Shannon.
I'm going to build off of what Margaret said, I think, earlier on imposter syndrome. It is real. I think it could be age, as Valerie spoke to, or just being a female in a tech-oriented world. Just having confidence and believing in yourself, because I think most of the times you don't realize that people around the table, they're just like us. I mean, perspective-wise, yes, we are, gender, race, diversity, whatever that might be, but they also have fears. They also are wrong. Everybody is not right all the time, and everybody has something to offer to the conversation. So I think for me, it would have been be bolder and speak up earlier in my career. And I always have had a natural tendency to just jump in and do things, but I think I would have done it a little bit differently by maybe articulating how I was going to do it and building up other females and bringing them along with me versus a little bit later on in my career as I moved into leadership. So I think for me it's about looking back, being bolder, taking some of those risks to speak up when you're not 100% sure, but it's okay to be 80% sure, and putting those ideas on there.
And before Valerie answers, I ask you all to think about this for a second, because Shannon just spoke about thinking about being bolder sooner and speaking up sooner. So it seems to me there's a correlation from when we're children, because children don't stop and think, they just go and do, right? But there's a point in our lives where we get to that point where we kind of stop and take a step back, and we maybe don't emerge or do those things quite so quickly. So maybe part of our mission is to help kids through the Code-On program, through other programs, so that they have that advantage of being bolder, speaking up sooner, and then when they're up here, I'm not asking them that type of question, I'm asking them other questions because they don't have to deal with that, or they didn't have to deal with that. So Valerie, how about you?
So I think I would just tell my younger self to enjoy it more. There are so many great, fun things in tech, and it changes all the time. So I think I would just tell myself to enjoy it more, to enjoy the actual team, and and really care about the people on your team, and that will get you farther than, knowing every little thing about tech, being that team player and working well with the team and just enjoying everyone around you and the journey is what I would point on.
You think, just a quick sidebar, because you made me think of something, and maybe everybody's willing to raise their hand or not, but do you think that there's this stigma or thought process that, to be in tech, you know everything. Somebody in tech that's a professional knows everything. Definitely, and we don't.
Yeah, I know. I think there's a perspective for people who aren't in the field that, you're going to know everything. You can fix my iPhone, you can fix the printer, you can do all that. Anything, the refrigerator, the ice is coming out of the refrigerator, can you help me out? You're in tech. And then I also had this perspective that when I had a PhD, I was the smartest person ever. And you just go down from undergrad, getting smarter. So I think there's that expectation. I think it's changing. As more people are technically literate and everything, they see how hard the problems are. And so I think hopefully that's changing.
Right, because yes, we don't do everything. And my other point to that, making that comment, was that don't think that you need to know everything to be a woman in technology. There's so many different avenues and so many different career choices to be had. So Amy, tell us, what would be that conversation with your future self?
So if you know me, I'm pretty tightly wound most of the time. So I would probably just make myself let a lot of things go. Let things matter a lot less. Feedback, criticism, F-bombs in meetings, things like that should just matter a lot less. And you should worry about the work that you do and the things that you know or don't know and need to know. And focus on your career and work and your path forward.
Awesome. Mark?
So I've been in tech just under 5 years, so it's not that hard to remember myself 4.5 years ago, but I would first tell myself to chill. I'm also very tightly wound, but I would also just try to convince myself to trust the process. With every job opportunity that didn't work out, a better one or a different one came along. The place I thought would be my dream job didn't end up being my dream job, and if I hadn't worked there, I might not have been in the place that I was to be able to work at Boomtown at that time. And so I would just get myself to release a little bit and trust the process, and I would tell myself that I'm better at doing this than I think I am.
I think my comment will go back to the confidence aspect. I think I would love to tell myself to be more confident. I can't tell you how many times I went to apply for a job and read down a list of qualifications and thought, I can't do that. I don't know what that is. I can't do that. And now I'm at a company where I'm a hiring lead for one of the teams, and I can tell you right now, those qualifications are guidelines. Like I guess I can't speak for every tech company, but we want to find the right person and teach them those skills as opposed to finding the most skilled person out there and then just not fitting in with the company. I think just having the confidence in yourself and you are qualified for what you want to do.
Awesome. Jen?
All fantastic points. Yes, I have all, but I have to come up with something new, so I'll go into it. A serious one though. I think in my young years, I asked the questions about why we were building things. I don't know how many of you have built shelfware, as in it never gets used. To understand, it's not rewarding to build that stuff, right? As I've moved on in my career, really understanding the customer problems and what we're trying to solve, look at data, right? Don't just take requirements and blah, I'm gonna build this thing. Really understand what you're building, why you're building it, because you're gonna build something better. You're gonna go to the table and you're gonna have great ideas about maybe we should change this or change that. You're really gonna be much more engaged. And instead of just taking something and building it, understand why you're building it and what the value is, and you'll provide more value.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And I'd just like to share with you all one thing that I would tell my future self. This is going to really date me. When you're taking that word processing class, don't say to the marketing people, computers are stupid and that no one will ever use them. I eat a lot of crow every day. But tell me now, ladies, about the common thread you see among women right now that we need to remain vigilant on year after year to continue the momentum that we have right now. And now I'll let you pass the microphone. Somebody else may have that answer. Yeah. Any thoughts about that?
Bring it all the way back up. Yeah, for me it's empowerment. I think there's a lot more visibility around, women helping women, men helping women. For me, I love looking around as you progress in your career and have the ability to kind of pick and choose the types of roles that you move into and the teams that you take responsibility for. I think it's really important to look around. I think Margaret said she walked in and she looked around, she was the only female that she could see. For me, it's really important to understand that, and I think we have come a long way in empowering women, from both females empowering women and also men who empower women. And it's really important to me to look around and see those men who stand out, who are there to support and ask the questions and perspectives of other females. So empowerment, but not just from female to female, but also just as, the human nature of things, like let men and women continue to empower each other.
Awesome. Anybody else on that thought? What do we have to?
I've always said amongst college women that are in computer science, I think the common thread throughout all the years is unbelievably talented and qualified and very on the ball and want to get things done, detail-oriented, which is exactly what we need in computer science. I think what we have to remain vigilant on is supporting those women in computer sciences, keeping their confidence high, making sure they understand that we didn't feel like we got it back then, right? Or if you did, wow, you're in the minority. But, I didn't feel like I got it back then either. I just tried it out and I kept going, and maybe just instilling that confidence that, that mentorship that you're going to make it, you're going to do a great job.
Yeah, and going off of that, I think it's really important to teach kids when they're young. As a lot of us have said, as Bo mentioned, we have Code On, there's volunteer opportunities and mentorship opportunities. Getting it into the minds of kids that it is possible, that it's exciting, that it's out there. So I think that's really important as well.
Awesome. So, Jen, I'll start with you on this one. Because I think each of you come from a different perspective, so I think this one maybe anybody will want to answer. So, in the tech industry, how do you see it changing for you or your company? And what does that mean for women just starting out in tech? And then women like us that are a little farther along in our careers?
I think overall what I've seen is an awareness of the need to be inclusive. I don't think 20 years ago people looked at the applicant pool and went, we don't have a single female on this list. Right? I think there's such an awareness now, and that's better for all of us, is that there is this question about, are we being inclusive? People realize that you should be, and are we doing things, are we educating? And I think that that's a wonderful thing.
So how do you see the industry changing with this?
I would go ahead and piggyback off of that. I haven't been in the industry long, but I think that just having that awareness that there are so many different people in the world and so many different people that will work for you, and just being able to realize that, being able to be in a meeting and being able to speak up as a woman, man, any ethnicity, any gender, and have your thoughts heard. And I see it happening more and more each year, I think.
I definitely agree with Jen's point. the default now is to look at a pool of applicants or a panel or a keynote list and say, and have confidence saying, this is not a diverse group of people, what are we going to do about it? Whereas even 2 years ago, it's kind of, like we tiptoed, but I mean now it is we are asking, what are we going to do about this, front and center. The second thing I've noticed, though, Boomtown's great at this, is the flexibility that we allow, not only just women in tech, but anyone. I mean, we have paternity, we at Boomtown have paternity leave now, and paternity leave is not just for the father, it's for everyone, it's for mothers, I mean, it's just such a huge thing to be able to leave your job at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to pick your children up, or take the time off that you need to raise your children when they're first born. And I think that's just an amazing thing that the tech field is doing really, really well, and hopefully other industries will start to keep up. I don't personally have children, but my boss and one of my best coworkers does, and I just see that like how much it allows them to grow in their careers, because they don't have to fear that they're going to face retribution for leaving earlier than 5 p.m. or taking spring break with their kids. And that didn't exist with my parents growing up, and they just think it's amazing, and I think it's something that's super, super great in the tech world.
I think that the changes that are coming along with the awareness are impactful. I think like you look at how the interview process is changing with the awareness of diversity, how everything is now anonymized along the way. There's behavioral interviews, and then there's these different types of interviews that are almost white labeled, so that there's no way to really skew it on a bias. I think that's an interesting point for those who are entering into the industry. I think it makes it easier, lowers that barrier, versus someone who's already in the industry, because someone who's coming into the industry is going to be trained on these interviews. Someone who's in the industry has no clue how to do these things. But I also think the systems that are, like the leave systems and the benefits and things like that are coming along with awareness are actually going to benefit all of us. And I think those are really good. I think Charleston has a long way to go, but it's coming.
And I would say in the next 10 years, I think we're going to see a bigger push for equity in pay, because I think that's where we've got to go next. As we rise up in the ranks and as we're the ones looking down the payroll, we ought to be able to make some judgment calls about, hey, this does not look equal for the years of service. And we've got to start making our voice heard there, because when it starts right in the wallet, that's an important place. So I think that's what we as women need to start really doing, is pushing for that equity in pay. 70 cents on the dollar does not make it happen.
No, I think for me, I see, being in business for 20 years now, you look back and there weren't things like affinity groups, and there weren't groups like this that were well attended and well recognized. So again, it's seeing this now come to the forefront. Technology is not going anywhere. So I think, to what everyone else has said, we've got to invest in generations to come. But for those of us that are already in it, we should feel privileged and double down in that area, but do more to, encourage things like, equal pay and looking around the table. And if anybody looks kind of lost or like they have something they want to say, encourage them to speak up. So again, I think it's more about just like, we're in this era of empowerment. We just need to continue that momentum. I love the technology field. I think it's fast, it's exciting, it changes quickly. But we are at an advantage because we're in it already. So,
Absolutely. And to your point, Valerie, I can offer a 3-letter word that I offer to all the students that I mentor when it comes to salary negotiations: ask. Most of us ladies, that's what we fail to do, is just ask. We undervalue ourselves and don't think about that, and so we're hopeful and we want to step out of that comfort zone and ask, but we don't. And so I think if we begin to ask a little bit more, we'll find that start to really change for us. So I think you'll all agree with me this evening. We've heard a few words that were quite consistent We heard empowerment. We heard diversity, inclusiveness. We've heard a little bit about imposter syndrome, which is definitely real. I know all about that one. We heard about equal pay, and we heard about mentoring one another and standing up and helping one another. Ladies, on behalf of everyone here and everybody at Charleston Women in Tech, thank you so much for taking part in this panel this evening and offering your wonderful experiences and your words of wisdom.